if we allow tourism to continue in this unsustainable way that's hurting our island, right, then we're going to lose those things that we value here in Guam and the things that bring tourists here in the first place.
Like later than most.
Oh, not 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
But you did. Yeah, you should say that because the blue.
God,
Sorry.
my mic is showing a little. I'm sorry.
You have to redo the walk-on?
Today.
What issue will you all be discussing today?
So today we'll be discussing tourism and the negative impacts this industry has on our environment and our community.
Can you all give us a brief overview of this issue?
So the tourism industry accounts for 60% of Guam's total revenues, and critical government operations and services rely on this industry.
Yeah, that revenue, it's about $1.8 billion. And tourism as an industry accounts for about 18,000 of the jobs on the island, which is about a third of all non-federal jobs. Right before the pandemic, we were averaging about 1.3 million tourists a year. This year, we're projecting close to 500,000 a year.
So you can see with some of these statistics that tourism is a massive industry on our island, but it also has major impacts on our environment and our community. So some exit surveys found that tourists actually visit Guam for our sea, our sun, and our sand. It makes sense that 28% of our tourism relies on water activities involving coral and marine life that includes scuba diving and water sports. Every year, approximately 300,000 dives are recorded.
Yeah, and oftentimes those water activities, right, those recreational activities have impacts, destructive impacts on our water resources, right, and our natural heritage. So things like damage to coral reefs, damage to beaches, damage to just even fish populations around our island are caused by a lot of tourist activities related to water sports.
It's also difficult to have these conversations about our current system and how unsustainable it is. A lot of the talk of tourism, with the media, the government, just the community in general, it's centered around money for development and expansion. And what we really need to be focusing on is Guam, like what we have and how we can protect those resources for our future generations.
And if we allow tourism to continue in this unsustainable way that's hurting our island, right, then we're going to lose those things that we value here in Guam and the things that bring tourists here in the first place.
So when we talk about the tourism industry, what exactly is being impacted?
One of the things being impacted is our environment and the overconsumption of our natural resources, the pollution and destruction to the land and sea, and natural habitat loss due to destruction and expansion of the industry.
Another thing being impacted is our infrastructure. So imagine new buildings and businesses that are catering tourists, transportation systems, even activities that are accommodating our visitors, while our locals are lacking critical resources such as affordable and safe housing, well-maintained public parks and beaches, and so much more.
Yeah, and when we talk about locals, right, many have a stake in the tourism industry. They may be working in the tourism industry. They may rely on the income that comes from that industry, right? But tourism itself, or Guam itself, is too dependent on tourism. So when we see things like global pandemics or even economic downturns in other countries, then we see that our economy is severely affected by it, right? Or another thing is that many of these corporations here in Guam, these tourist businesses, aren't owned locally. The billions of dollars that tourists are spending here in Guam, where is that money really going? Is it benefiting Guam? Is it staying in Guam? Or is it going off island to benefit corporations in other countries?
All right, so who has the power to make significant changes for this issue?
The Department of Revenue Tax has significant power to affect the tourism industry. They have the ability to tax all these tourism businesses, these tourism operators. In addition to that, the Attorney General also has significant power. The Attorney General can prosecute tourism operators that cause these harmful effects on the environment.
GVB also has the power to promote and in turn support businesses that align with our local culture and values.
Yeah, and the legislature, right, they have the policy-making authority to help alleviate the harms of tourism, also restore whatever damage has already been caused related to tourism, right, and then promote new, healthy, maybe restorative, regenerative methods of tourism here in Guam. They also have the unique authority to implement taxes on, let's say, businesses that where we know that harms are being done on our resources, right? They can, let's say, implement a tax that goes directly towards mitigating the impacts of those harmful effects of tourism industry on our resources.
What are some recommendations or solutions that you all propose?
I propose that GVB focus on agricultural initiatives where tourists can learn Guam through the land and the food. So I really highlighted culture because I want, kind of similar to like what Valley of the Ladi and like Hamamoto Farms was doing, where they're really focusing on Guam's land and what we provide. So with this proposal, I really want to focus on like tourists giving back and participating in making the island better by contributing to our food insecurity issues, by learning what it is to be food insecure and what is like culturally and regionally relevant to what we consume, you know, prior to the diet that was introduced to us. With this, it also just doesn't focus on the plants and the trees that we have. I really want us to really tie in the animal agriculture industry aspect of it. So instead of like building new farms, we can already invest in the farms that we have, the farmers that we do have, and expanding that, because that also would expand the land capacity that they have. This could also be funded with the tourist attraction fund, with GVB being like a marketer and a planner for designated agricultural farms.
I think something that could be really, that could like build off on that is if like, you know, a lot of people that they come to Guam, they come for like the good food, like tacking on like a restaurant that is like, it's exactly farm to table, where it's like, you know, a part of the tour is going out and like seeing, like helping like hello, whatever. And then like when you go in for lunch or for dinner, whatever time like a tour is set up, like you get to eat from food that's cooked from the stuff that you brought in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also another cultural aspect to it would be like the tourists learn how to harvest it and learn how we process it and preserve our food. And then they can learn our native words for these crops and the actions that we do on the farm.
Love
it.
Also, this is a dream of mine.
Okay, let's go. Yeah, Tati next.
So I proposed for Department of Revenue Tax to make it a requirement for tourism operators to obtain ecological trainings and certifications. This would require them to obtain like the necessary knowledge to conduct their operations with knowledge about how to be sustainable and not harm our environment or our indigenous culture.
Who do you see facilitating the certification and trainings?
I would suggest, I don't even know. I didn't think that through. Wait.
It could be through like the
Let me take a moment.
professors, like
Yeah,
UOG professors,
UOG.
DOAG.
Yeah, agriculture.
I mean,
Dower.
depending on like, yeah, maybe
Dower.
depending on like
Dower.
the operator, it would like be
Oh, is it?
targeted. So like you wouldn't
Water.
expect like a marine,
Fire.
like a scuba company to be like, okay, here we're gonna learn about plants, you know? It's like,
They should, or sorry, no.
like,
Yeah.
she's ag, that's why. she's
Sorry.
Always.
Okay.
And then what's the longevity behind this? Like, so let's say they get the certification, like how do we know that they're gonna like change their ways because of getting that certification? Like, is there a way to police that?
I'm not too sure who would like enforce these practices, but I would suggest that Department of Revenue Tax make it a requirement in order for them to maybe like renew their business license. So if they want to continue conducting business, they would have to go and gain these certifications.
On the island, we currently have, I believe it's like less than 10, like 6 or so conservation officers whose like whole thing is like they go around the island looking for things like that, like any like damage to the natural like resources. But it's so underfunded because it's such a small like group. Maybe like the money going into the certification, like when you pay for your certification, can go to funding that division to help better police, like, you know,
Hire more people.
hire more people. Yeah.
That's a great idea. Thank you for answering your question.
Does anyone have any more comments on that?
I also good. Okay. I also think that just having certification, like, I think it's just really, like, a lot of people don't know just how harmful they are to the environment. Like, you've been, like, raised a certain way, or, like, you just take things for granted, or, like, you think it's normal. But, like, yeah, like, it took a long time for people to realize, like, stepping on coral is not good for the coral. Like, they're not rocks. And so maybe, like, by getting their certification and, like, being educated in the ways in which they can be more ecologically minded, I think these tourism operators can really start to change their ways, especially since they're the ones that are going to be working most closely with these resources, and with a large audience that is going to be working with these resources as well.
Viva. Okay, let's have Nolan next.
Okay, so I think a solution to the issue we're discussing today is to incentivize restorative tourism. So I think the legislature needs to implement some type of like qualifying certificate program, right? Which gives businesses kind of tax breaks, gives them a reason to establish operations here, right? But I think we should focus the restorative tourism part of it, on businesses that have been proven to do methods of tourism that aren't destructive, right? They're not destructive, they're not extractive, they're not harmful to the environment. Rather, they're contributing to the environment. They're restoring the things that have kind of been damaged by other types of tourism here in Guam, right? We should bring in, let's say, international or even global businesses that have already proven themselves to be restorative, that have proven themselves to put kind of protection over profit, right? Does that make sense, guys? Any questions?
Can you give an example of restorative tourism? Like, what does that look like?
It might be something like you're helping to plant things, or you're helping to, or even businesses that kind of help restore water resources, right? Like you're helping to grow back coral that has been damaged, or you're helping to develop a fishery, right? And we can find ways to make this attractive for tourists, right? Make it appealing to tourists, because people come here for, whatever you say, Muturwan, sand,
Sea,
sun, and sand. Yeah. So if we take those things and we change it from just using the resources and instead giving back to them and helping grow them, right? Then the tourists will appreciate that, and we'd get something out of it. We'd be helping our resources rather than destroying them.
Yeah. It's bleeding in
Yeah.
Okay, Viva.
So I propose to revamp GVB and pretty much have a more indigenous focus, so that tourism is restorative and also regenerative. This would focus on 3 steps that I have. One would be encouraging activities that are more heritage walks. That way we can reduce not just traffic in urban populations, but also enjoy the natural landscape while also preserving it, and just promoting a walking culture on our island. The second one would be for GVB to directly fund nonprofit organizations whose mission is to reduce our impact because of tourism and help regenerate our resources because of this industry. Some organizations I have in mind are Numalu Refillery and Micronesian Climate Change Alliance. And then my last step is just for GVB to also collaborate with the Center of Island Sustainability and the Guam Green Grows. That way we can regulate waste management that is produced by the tourism industry, and overall protect our environment.
I like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the solution. That's big.
Yeah.
And what I like, it tackles so many different issues that there's a lot of things that people can come in and like still contribute to it, which I think is very inafa'maolek. It's like there is no one way, but it's like a fiesta table. Like, we know the plan. There's like rice, there's meat, there's vegetable, dessert, and people come in and they bring in what they feel like they can or what they're good at. And I can see that, like, especially in the beginning when you like bring in diversifying tourist destinations on Guam. So rather than just like within Tumon, but like that walking culture, going out and venturing into like other places, I think that's really good. Like, some people are a little iffy about having tourists like around like parts of their village, but I mean, with this like center, like this feeling of hospitality, like I think we can make spaces for them that they can, feel safe enough to visit within a village.
So how realistic do you think it would be for them to change their way of operating after so many years? Or like, what would push them to do so?
because the legislature
we're
says
telling
so.
them.
Yeah.
Because Department of Maolek said.
No, yeah, I looked into it because in GVB, you're also not just looking to the board changing their ways, but also even members. You have to tell members that these are the new activities that we're going to try to promote, get in on it or not. And it's for the board to expand their relationships in the community, helping nonprofit organizations and those that are helping our resources. So I think in order for GVB to do that, we do need incentives from higher up the legislature or even the government of Guam, our governor, to say this is how we're going to reshape this industry, because we still rely on it, but its major impacts is detrimental to our environment, to our land and sea. So in order for us to keep profiting from this, we have to also keep in mind preserving our natural resources.
And I like the idea too that you said we're just empowering and supporting like existing organizations, right? You said New Matlu, Refillery, and MCCA, right? They're already doing a lot of great work here in Guam. It's just about giving them more funding, more support to expand what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
No, I think it's a really great idea too, because GVB, one of their like slogans or sayings is making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit. And that tackles all three of those.
Yeah.
So my solution is to put a new tax on tourism operators. The important part isn't necessarily like what we're going to tax or how we're going to tax, but where the tax would go. So the tax, the money from the tax would go to different organizations or agencies that are specifically working to mitigate the harmful effects that tourism or other just like human things would have on the specific environments. And the tax from specific tourism operators would be linked to those specific agencies. So like, for example, if you're a scuba company, then the tax that we would tax for you would go directly to the Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources, or Guam Fish and Wildlife. That way it's the people that are most responsible for the negative effects, or like in those areas where those negative effects happen, are also responsible for like paying for the solutions to them, right? And it goes directly to the agencies and the organizations that are already working at mitigating these things. And it can expand to more than just like the environment. Right, like we were saying with ocean, it can be like DAWR for plants. Like if it's like land-based or terrestrial-based, we can see them like the tax being linked to like Department of Agriculture. And then even for historical tours, like tours that take people around the island to these historical sites, like that can go to like the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, or the Guam Museum. And that way we really link like these private businesses with these departments within the community that are really there to serve the community. So tourism has a more direct benefit to the people rather than just like shoveling money into the economy. What could also be added or built upon is like different nonprofit organizations that are also working towards these things could apply or could request to receive or be tacked on to those taxes, like via like legislative budgeting. So like nonprofit organizations like Guampedia or NIHI, or the Farmers Co-op or the Fishermen's Co-op could also ask for funding from these different tax sources. So it's a new way to see the money from the tourism go into the community.
Yeah, I really like it, Laz. I think it connects tourism and these operators, right, these businesses, to the agencies that are kind of helping to fix and alleviate some of the harms of tourism, right? A tax it can be very similar to the hotel occupancy tax, right? Where it's funding the tourist attraction fund, and then that's kind of, it's this cycle, right, of giving back to each other in a sense. But now we're bringing our resources into it. We're giving back to our resources from where tourism operations might be harming them, right? I think one issue though, or maybe something we need to think about, is whether if these businesses are paying the tax, right? Do they kind of, what if they develop this sense of, oh, we do enough by paying the tax, so we don't really need to care about these practices that aren't harmful. We don't need to care about whether what we do is going to hurt our reefs, for example, because we're paying the tax, and because the tax is going toward fixing the reef. It doesn't really matter what our actions are, right? I guess how do we avoid that if we were to implement a tax like that?
One thing that I can see working pretty well is if we use this tax really as just an opening for us to form and to restore relationships between these nonprofit organizations, these government agencies, and these private corporations, right? The tourism sector. By like saying that like, you know, your company, like your scuba company, your diving company, is directly funding or helping to fund like DAWR's like different protocols or different procedures. Like it's also like a marketing thing for you. And so because you now have like that name attached to you, there is a greater sense of like responsibility for one another. Since your money is going there and you have their name with you and like you're getting their funding from them, they're gonna be a lot more like watchful of each other and a lot more helpful with one another. And I think that opens the door to much more collaboration, where you can tap on those like government agencies that you're partnered with and say like maybe we can like expand like the scuba tour to include like something that is more restorative, right? And it just gets more people talking with each other rather than just thinking about like one specific goal in mind, right? Which is like, okay, I want to like make money off of this one thing.
So I think another solution to what Nolan was inquiring for you was maybe having like a deduction if tourist operators implemented this an educational video and a class that visitors can take, kind of similar to what the Palau Pledge does is it teaches the visitors before they even land on Palau how to be responsible for the place that they're visiting for our future generations and learning about the Palau culture and why it's so important to be culturally aware and respectful to where they're visiting. So another part of this initiative would be for GVB to readjust their exit surveys and kind of ask the questions to what did they learn, making them recollect like what was done at their tours, you know. This doesn't just focus on like if they had a good time. This focuses on like what did they actually learn about the people and the place that they visited and how they can be better visitors for other places too.
I think with your solution, it expands the job of GVB to sort of be a third party audit to go into these businesses and see like this is the effectiveness of what the regenerative tourism looks like. And then it's asking the tourists themselves, like, what did you learn and how is this going to change long-term tourism for our island?
And it improves everyone's experience, right? It improves their experience as tourists, but it also improves our experience as the people living here in Guam, the people that are here when tourists aren't here, right? That when tourists go, yeah.
Did you consider that if we ever face, I guess, an economic crisis or a slump in tourism, would regenerative tourism be lacking because there won't be a tax to fund?
I think like one of the big things is really just going to be timing. We need to like establish this early on. What I can see, or like not early on, but establish this at a point in which our tourism economy has rebounded. Because I think once you get people into the habit of doing something, they start to, you know, it starts to become a part of like trainings for like new employees. And I think that it's going to be a little bit to get them to like have to, you know, feel like we have to force them a little bit through like the taxation to get them to, you know, to sort of change their ways. Ultimately, like by paying for the tax, you see the direct benefits, which is like a nicer ocean, a nicer coral reef, right? Like more green spaces, like all of those things. And those are things that like inherently bring tourists back. And those are things that make tourists a lot happier to go on more, you know, to engage with different tourism operators throughout the island. So I think it's really having to show that direct connection between like the money that they're paying goes directly to making Guam better, which is exactly what tourists are looking for, which in turn gives them better business. So yeah, I think that while the tax, it does like I don't really like the fact that it's like, you know, do this or else, or it's like, you know, just give us money. But I think it's the beginning of like really talking with these agencies, the beginning of relationships forming between these agencies and the tourism industry as a whole.
It's the bigger picture, not.
Yeah.
So I would suggest for the legislature to propose a bill that would establish what we would call sacred land protections, and these would work in similar ways that MPAs or marine protected areas work, right, or work currently. So once an area is established as sacred land, it would, depending on where the area is at or what the purpose is, it would restrict access altogether or restrict any harmful activities that would take place in these areas.
How does this sacred land protection notation differ from national or historic register? So on Guam, you can register lands as being historic through the parks and Department of Parks and Rec, and then those lands that are designated as historic, you cannot build on them. You have to leave them as they are. Would that be the similar, or are there different things that the sacred land protections has that wouldn't? Because historic lands obviously needs to be historic. Would this expand on that, or is it more or less the same?
So I think the limitations would vary depending on, again, where the area's at or what the purpose is or what makes it sacred. But it could be just restricting tourist activity, or it could be there would be a department or a representative from their organization would have to be there when people are going to these sites. So they can't just walk in whenever. They would have to schedule or ask for permission with this agency. Because sacred land, should be used by locals or people that are of Guam. But my main concern is restricting access to harmful tourist activity.
So for relevancy, do you have any places in mind that need this protection or any tourism activities that you want to limit? It's open to the group if anyone has any ideas.
I think Pauget is a pretty good one. When you do go by there, you see tour buses and everything, and it's good. But during certain times of the year where there are a lot of tourists or where the weather's really nice, you can see there are a lot of people going through there dropping trash or really just disturbing the trail in general. It's a pretty well visited site, even by locals throughout the year. So noting that as a sacred land protection could give that place that already experiences high traffic some time to restore itself.
That's a good idea, Laz, right? Making it temporary, right? So if we see that these places are kind of being trashed, let's say, or things are being the trail is getting too wide or too large, and there's too many people frequenting that area and kind of trampling on the resources there, right? Then maybe we institute just a temporary ban that kind of says this place needs some time to get back to its natural state, right? It needs some time to regrow to be healthy and to be what visitors enjoy, what visitors come to it for, right? So maybe temporary, a temporary prohibition or restriction on access when places needs to not have visitors going there every day and so many hundreds of people walking through there.
Yeah.
A great example that we can have when we look at sacred land protections, we look at Palau. They actually close restrictions to the jellyfish lake in order to help the population of jellyfish, because you had visitors going in using fins that started killing off the jellyfish, and just traffic of tourists going into the lake and just slowly killing off the jellyfish population. And because of its unique natural environment, it needed that time, 2 years, for the jellyfish to come back and naturally repopulate the lake.
Yeah. I like the shortening of the ban. If you're a local on the island and all of a sudden someone says you can't go here anymore, it's okay, so I can't go to these places because the tourists are there. I can't go to these places because it's the military, and now my own government is telling me I can't go here. But when you start to put it under the impression of it is we're not saying you can't go here forever, but you like this place, you love this place, and we want to restore it to when you first discovered it. I think leading with that, I think would be really helpful. For getting the local people, or just regular people on board with it. It's an injection of inafa'maolek again into the way we're supposed to be living our lives, where it's not all take, but it's at some points in our lives we need to give back to the land a little bit.
I also think it would encourage locals to go there even more than they do now if they know, because sometimes you take advantage of these resources, I can go there whatever time I want to. So I'll just go next week, and then it just never happens. But if they know, like, oh shoot, in 2 months they're gonna restrict access, I need to go now, and it would bring locals to these sites as well as tourists.
Viva.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that we've discussed all of your solutions, let's decide if we should remove any off the board. How do you guys feel?
I think they could all fit under its own, like maybe if you had like 2 different categories where it'd be like focusing on GVB and then the like DRT and the legislatures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you guys want to group things?
Also, maybe Kat, like you have something that is more on the protection side, like the dealing with the effects after, but then you have something that's more on the proactive side, right?
Yeah.
So making sure things are restorative and doing different types of agriculture farms, and then I think maybe revamping GVB falls on that proactive side too, right? Where
Yeah.
we're trying to stop the harms before they even happen. And so maybe we can split it that way.
I think the revamping GVB would be like the main one for that one too, because everything else could fall under that.
Yeah. And like your agriculture farm thing it falls directly under like restorative tourism. Like it's a good example. We want tourists to, like you said, grow the food or help grow the food that they eat in restaurants or what.
This would be here. Okay, and then
Those 3 together.
Okay.
Nice.
So why should our leaders care about the solutions you both proposed today?
Yeah, so we talked about like how the tourism industry in its current state is centered around things like money and things like profit and just catering to outsiders, right? And we talked about the harms that has on our resources here. Our leaders need to care because we need to recenter our contextualization of tourism on ourselves, right? On the resources that make Guam so attractive, that make Guam so appealing to visitors. And these things that we love about our island are the things that the tourists love about our island too. So if we want tourism to be sustainable for us and for them, then we need to preserve these resources. We need to keep these things pristine. We need to keep them protected, preserved for generations to come if we're going to continue living here, if we're going to continue to have tourists coming in.
I think it's also important that we consider bringing in the culture to these tourist operators, because I feel like with what we have going on, our current system, it's kind of reshaping our identity.
Yeah, I think it's important to push the idea to our leaders that we don't need to mirror these other places in order to bring people in. Like, we have a lot to offer, and the things, again, that we love about our island, we can share with them and they can enjoy it as well, instead of trying to outsource these different ideas of what tourists like.
I think the challenge is that we don't want to commodify our culture, but we do want to present it in ways that it's here for the tourists. We're going to attract tourism either way, but we have to take care of our environment because tourists come to Guam for the island experience, but we want that to more be shaped by the islanders and giving them access to the environment, the land and sea that's being damaged and destroyed by the tourism industry. And by taking care of that, tourists will come, and then our economy will benefit from the waves that do enter our island, but we should take care of our people first and our environment in order for future generations to benefit from regenerative tourism and just preservation of our island.
One of the values of inafa'maolek really is having that sort of respect for the land around us. And that's rooted deeply in the belief that's shared by like many Chamorros that like our ancestor spirits like reside in the ocean and the land and the trees and the air. And in the same way that you like show that level of respect to like your Nana or your Tata who are alive, like they showed that level of respect to their Nana's Nana and their Tata's Tata that now lives in the land around them. You know, it's easy for us to get lost in this idea that we need to make money or like that we need to like, you know, market Guam, as something other than what it is, when really it just needs to be us like showing that level of respect for the land, showing the level of respect for like the Inisi, like the spirits that came before us, and then that in itself preserves like the land here so that other people can come and like see how well we treat the land and why it's so important to us, like regardless of whether it's a parking lot or it's like hilaan like land is land and this like island is home. And I think like if we can put that forward in tourism and have that at the forefront through all of these solutions, the tourists can like pick up easily on that and see that, you know, that Guam is not just a place for you to like have fun and not care about anything else, but to have fun also, but in a way that respects the people and their beliefs here. To the leaders of Guahan, we, the Department of Maolek, believe that our island is more than just a visitor's paradise. It is an ancestral home.
The impact of tourism on our environment and our community must be addressed. We are calling on our leaders to consider the following proposals.
To require tour operators to obtain both ecological and cultural certifications and training programs to assess their impact.
To develop sacred land zones that can be temporarily designated as areas that need to be protected from visitors in order to recover.
To tax tour operators and have these funds go directly to agencies and organizations working to restore our environment and culture.
To change GVB's focus from industry to indigenous needs by investing in tourism that gives back to our communities instead of taking from them.
Ethical tourism begins with a relationship of reciprocity between visitors and our land, ocean, and community. We cannot offer what we do not protect.
Guahan's beauty must be nurtured and preserved, not just for us, but for future generations.
Hafiday, I'm Siobhon. I'm the director of the Department of Maolek. In the next episode, the department will be discussing illegal dumping on Guam. Subscribe below so you don't miss it.